beautiful life he built with Mom during their 33-year marriage, and then his ability to rise up from the devastation of that death and rebuild a beautiful life in the 10 years since then with his sons, me and Danny, with Kathleen, his second wife, and I know with so many of you. So I sort of like to use those two movements as the framework just to reflect on my father with you today. Prior to meeting Mom, Dad didn't lack a direction in life, and he didn't really lack love in his life at all. He was the youngest of 5 children, the youngest by 15 years. And without question, his father and his 2 brothers, Henry and June, and his 2 sisters, Chico and Miwa, without question, they provided a loving, doting family. And yet there was, when he talked about his childhood, there was this sense of sort of transience and a sense of sort of instability within. He spent ages 2 through 4 at Manzanar, a relocation camp in World War II. From there, he lived among various relatives and church families throughout Los Angeles in his boyhood. His mother, his only memories of his mother were of a woman just racked with illness. He just told me probably two and a half weeks ago that his final memory of his mother was when he was a 6-year-old boy in the back of a car driving up to Camarillo to claim her body at the hospital where she spent the last several months or several weeks of her life. And so, there was just this sort of vacancy, a certain disorientation, maybe a lack of grounding in his early years. So it's, I guess, August of 1962, and he's a student at Georgetown Medical School. And he and his roommate sort of work up the nerve to introduce themselves to these girls from Kentucky who have moved the apartment across the street up on the 2nd floor, he said. And my brother asked him about that encounter maybe 3 weeks ago on videotape, and he captured my dad's sort of recounting of that first meeting with my mom. And there was a sentence I was particularly fond of. It sort of has just my dad's aura about it. He said, "I found her beguiling and friendly and poised, and she had that southern grace that's hard to describe, but easy to define if you're the object of it, and if you're an egotistical young man." And Dad was the first to acknowledge that at that point in his life, something elemental changed, that almost a secular spirituality sort of centered him from that moment forward. It would not be accurate, to say that he lived only for her or only through her. It's just that she simply did for him what the ones who love us the most do for us. They allow our truest selves to bloom. And she allowed his most courageous, most visionary, sweetest self to bloom and to thrive. And so, at her side, he moved from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. At her side, he did his residency here, and he started his psychiatric practice, which was a practice whose mission was to relieve the suffering and restore the dignity of the mentally ill. At her side, he brought that sweetness, and that humor to the world. I'm sure so many of you have been beneficiaries of that. Just curiosity about your lives, his ability to sort of playfully, that sort of playful wit that could always make people smile. He voted at her side and voted liberally. He raised 2 sons with her, and he disciplined 2 sons with her. He punished and he yelled at 2 sons with her, one more than the other. And he was a Buddhist, and yet he attended Catholic Mass at her side almost every Sunday. He took in Vietnamese refugees with her in the 1970s and helped them find food and housing and jobs upon entry to the country. And with her, he taught his sons, in word but more so in action, he taught his sons that the America that we love is the America that defends the immigrant and the minority and the poor. When she was diagnosed with cancer in 1983, he fought that illness realized half their marriage was spent fighting that illness together. He comforted her. He explored treatment after treatment with her. He listened to her fears and her worries about this sort of ever-impending death that was looming above her. And in the final weeks and the final hours, he fed her and he clothed her and he cleaned her and he held her. It's June 10th, 1999, and early morning, and we get a call at the house saying that Mom has passed away in her hospital bed during the night. And I remember this very vividly, as driving down from the house to the hospital with my dad, and he confided that he knew on a very true and deep level that he'd never be happy again. He said he knew that he'd never find much meaning in life again. And yet he did. He just through sheer will and sheer defiance, he built an inspired and a meaningful life after her death. And that's sort of the second great triumph of his life that I'd like to share with you today. There were several pillars that helped Dad sort of rise up from the ashes of Mom's death. The first were his sons. Danny became Dad's source of stability and guidance after Mom's death. When Dad would sort of sometimes irritably or sarcastically say to Danny, "Who died and made you king?" the obvious rejoinder was, "Mom died and made Danny king." And she did. She explicitly made it clear to everybody. If you know my Uncle Michael, because he was the primary partner of that when she was growing up. But she explicitly sort of bestowed upon Danny the role of guardian and protector of the family in general, and Dad in particular. And Danny, you performed that role just with such fierce love and such fierce commitment. You just always making plans and provisions to ensure Dad's well-being. And you were larger than life to him. For a non-believer like Dad, you were the closest thing to the hand of God itself. If Danny was king of the castle after Mom's death, then both Dad and I together were sort of the court jesters. We were sort of like these delinquent troublemakers. We'd drive off at a moment's notice to the desert to play craps at some Indian casino all night long. We'd go to mafia movies and Springsteen concerts together, and we'd go to dinner and for hours just laugh and talk and share stories about Mom. And really, over the past 10 years, he's become my companion and my buddy. And I'm going to miss my companion terribly. Another pillar of this life rebuilt, this sort of renaissance of my father's, was his new job. In 2000, Dad started working at the Long Beach Asia Pacific mental health program. And he was the first, he would openly acknowledge that the work he did there, even though it was only 9 years out of his 43-year psychiatric career, he considered that to be his defining life's work. He considered that job to be his greatest professional success. I look out today and I see, so many of his coworkers and also so many of his clients. And it's important that you understand that the community and the camaraderie that you gave him saved him. He just glowed when he spoke of the clinic and of the community that he built there. He's the only person I've ever met who, and he did this very frequently on Sunday nights, he would just say how happy he was it was Sunday night because that meant he got to go to work the next morning on Monday. It's like every Sunday night was his Christmas Eve almost. And he really revitalized his love for the work he did, and also you revitalized his ability to be part of a community. So I really want to thank you for that. So now it's September of 2006, and Dad's getting his hair cut. And at the salon, he spots this elegant woman a few chairs down from him. And Dad's been a widow for over 7 years by this point, so he's sort of on the prowl a little bit. He's kind of got this, he thinks he has this mojo going, right? Sort of the Rico Suave thing. You know what I'm talking about, those of you that have seen that sort of Japanese strut he would do. And so he did what any self-respecting 66-year-old widower would do. He scrawled a note on a piece of paper. He gave it to his hairdresser and instructed her to give it to this elegant woman us. And it worked. She called, and you know, a lot of us here could say that symbolically we helped save his life. Kathleen literally saved his life. She intervened to prevent his death on 2 occasions over the past year and a half. He discovered a new will to live and a new will to love again in her, and it's just been an honor to watch that love bloom in him and between them these past 3 years. And I just want to thank Kathleen for that, for giving him that love and for building that inside him. So, you know, between Kathleen and his sons and the clinic, gradually Dad sort of resurrected his life out of Mom's death. In December of 2007, Dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he knew he had the fight of his life ahead of him. And he knew that that's a fight that you don't win. It's a question of how you lose it, how long it takes to lose it. And even then, you know, with that death sentence handed down to him, he continued to carve out new contours to this rebuilt life over this last 22 months. He married Kathleen, the love of his second life. He became a grandfather for the first time, and he spent so many hours doting on what he described as his iridescent and transcendent granddaughter, Aria Lynn. November 4th of last year, election night, I called him when the final returns were posted and we had elected our first African-American president. And I called Dad, and he was choking back tears, saying how he never thought he'd live to see this day and how proud he was to be an American at that moment. Even just 2.5 weeks before he died, he continued to go to the clinic. He continued to serve the needy even when his own body was ravaged with cancer. And that humor and that sweetness never left, not ever during those last 22 months. So many examples and stories, just the one that's made me and amused me so much over the past few days. It was about 36 hours before he died. He was in the hospital room, and this wonderful physician, his admitting physician, Dr. Rassick, came in basically to say goodbye. They were sending him home for hospice to take over. And it's a very poignant moment. Dr. Rassick puts his hand on my dad's shoulder and says, you know, Dr. Takaji, we're going to find a way to let you die with comfort and with dignity. And all you can probably picture this, Dad can't even open his eyes as much at this point. He's exhausted. And he says, Doc, I'll take the comfort, but you can keep the dignity. And just that lovely sweetness, you know, that lovely humor. Those of you that I know that visited him over the last several months, weeks, and days probably observed that even when he couldn't walk anymore, and even when he could barely breathe, he always found enough breath to ask you how you were doing, to make your concerns his concerns, and he always found enough breath probably to make some sweet-tempered comment to make you smile or make you laugh. And that was his goodbye. That was his goodbye to you. It would be nice, it would be comforting to say and to believe that Dad's with Mom again somewhere, that somehow they're sort of up in the heavens together, somehow, you know, maybe so, maybe not. I guess I take more comfort in believing that she never really left him in the first place, that she lived in his actions. She lived in his humor. She lived in his humility. She lived in his humanitarianism. She lived in his courageous rebuilding of his life after she died, and she lived in his fight for his own life these past 22 months. So, Dad, I'm going to say goodbye now. Just as Mom lived in your actions, so you'll live in our actions, especially in mine and Danny's. You'll live in our humor and our sweetness. You'll live in our defense of the poor and the powerless. You'll live in our defiance